Hello and welcome to Up Dog Sports Talk. We are here today to talk about our Big 12 predictions. I am not joined by Matt today, but we are joined by a former college football coach, Coach Rohaly. He coached over at Temple, and I'll let you go ahead and give everyone your other stops as well.
Oh yeah, I mean I've been all over. So D2 in Alderson Broaddus, which is in West Virginia, but it doesn't exist anymore. I also coach D3 in California for which also the football program doesn't exist. And then Wyoming, I worked in recruiting, and then also at Valpo, I worked special teams, which is FCS non-scholarship. So the same league as like USD and then Davidson. So a lot of different places, all different levels. And I started actually as a student assistant at Orange Coast College, which is a JC out in California, back in the day, and then I went to Arizona. So, been all over, all levels, and uh, I guess as an Arizona guy, I love talking about the Big 12, and hopefully my Cats can have a better year and see my. But I promise you guys, I won't just be for my Cats. I'll give the reality of what I actually think.
Very awesome. Welcome to the show. And yeah, we're excited to dive into the Big 12 today. The Big 12 is a conference that has very much gotten the reputation as a very competitive conference. And it's going into a very fascinating year. They are pushing to continue to improve on the field, get more bids to the playoff. And this year, they may be in a position for that. They have lots of good quarterbacks all over the league, tons of teams with returning production. So let's just go ahead and dive into it here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our tier list here of the Big 12. And we'll go ahead and start with the favorites here. Uh, Ben, when you look at the favorites tier here, we have Arizona State, Kansas State, Texas Tech. Of the teams that I put in this tier, are there any surprises in that tier from your perspective?
No, I think how K-State did, last year, that would be the only question for me is can they throw the ball a little bit better this year? I think at times they couldn't when they had to, of course, and they lost, a few guys, on their offense. But, I think they're always he's a North Dakota State guy, and he did so well at North Dakota State, won national championships, and it's run based, win with physicality. But can they stretch the field and get those big plays that you're score enough points? That will be my question for Kansas State. And those they did just like that Colorado game last year. They found a way to get the W in Boulder. They need to do some of those if they want to be able to make the playoff and be able to throw the ball. And their young quarterback, he's going to be make a big step, or is he going to make the big step? Because he has a lot more. A lot of people do believe in him as a top quarterback in college football, and it comes down to throwing the ball, in my opinion. But every other phase, they're just really, really good and really well coached. When they played Arizona last year, that kick return really changed the game. Um, so they have a lot of all phases. They're really good, but the question for me is, can they throw the ball well enough? And then Texas Tech has a lot of new pieces. I know that they put a lot of money into that team, into this team, and but early on in the season, how is everybody going to having? You have to learn a new playbook. Before when I was coaching, everybody was there for 4 years usually. So we didn't have it. Maybe you had grad transfers, but not like today. But those early games are really just can be. You saw it with Ohio State. They didn't look right in the beginning, but as the season went along, they got to their what they were really good at. The playbook was much more simple in the end of the season. They just what were their plays were bread and butter, and it's different. So having all these moving pieces can be more difficult sometimes. And I think with Notre Dame all those guys were there 2, 3 years and they looked everybody knew where they had to be, had to go, very well coached. So necessarily just having more talent doesn't necessarily make you a better football team. Look at Brian Kelly at LSU versus Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. I think Brian Kelly at LSU has a lot more talent than he had at Notre Dame. But on the field, how many college football playoffs did he go to at Notre Dame, and how many college football playoff or BCS uh, national championships versus LSU? And you may say the conference is harder, but he beat USC at Notre Dame, right? He didn't beat USC at LSU, so it all depends. So
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at this tier, Also, for one, like, who carries the most risk of having a disappointing season to you?
I think the Kansas State schedule in the beginning of the season is very difficult, uh, just because you have Army, you have Iowa State to start in week one, and Iowa State is no sleeper in my opinion. I think they're really a great football team and just really well coached. Even back in the day when he was at Toledo, right? He's
Oh
just
yeah,
such a
Matt
great
Campbell.
Matt Campbell, just such a great, really good coach, very underrated in my opinion, just because, they don't have, again, I think Kansas State and Iowa State are in the same boat from an offensive standpoint. Can they throw the ball well enough to win? They're going to be able to tackle in space, be able to win in the front seven and dominate in those areas, but can they get the big plays to get enough big plays to win the game? Can they score enough points? You're not going to like Iowa State last year losing to Houston. When they get in those tight games, they need, or was that Kansas State? I forget. It was one of
That
them.
was Kansas State, where they kind of
Kansas
got
State.
themselves in
Okay,
trouble
okay.
against
And
Houston.
Iowa State lost to someone too that wasn't a good loss in late in the season. I forget who, but when they get in those tight games, can they score enough points to win? And they're always going to be, in my opinion, the 8-9 win season. But can they take that next step and that will be the big question for me. I think ASU is also has a couple new pieces, and I think that Texas State game is not one to sleep on. If I'm an ASU fan, do not think that you're just going to go beat Texas State and it's going to be an 80-point game because that's what.
Absolutely.
And let me ask you this: if ASU did not, I guess they won the conference, so maybe they would have. But I think from a mental state, if they'd had a harder out of conference schedule in the beginning of the season and got beat a couple times, they're not going to have that swagger and that believe that we can make the playoff. And it's a different, but do you think they go undefeated into conference play? I don't know. Having those early games can be really difficult. Like, it's like I always say that I've told USF fans right now because they have Boise State, Florida, and Miami. Coach can't lose the team after those three games. And if they lose those games, how can you have that locker room? I don't. It's really a hard place to be when you're starting 0-3. I don't think I've ever started 0-3, but
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. And like that's actually like a really good point because in all reality, these are new teams. Everyone is learning how to win again, how to play as a team again each year. And that's kind of a headline we don't talk about very often. We just kind of look at what the team looks like on paper and go from there. But you're right though. Like things could spiral out of control very easily. We saw it with Florida State last year.
yeah, I mean, even with Kansas. I mean,
Yeah,
Kansas, when they
absolutely.
lost to UNLV, they lost a few games where that they, the Illinois game, and I think Illinois was a much better opponent than people gave Illinois. I think Illinois is one of the best coach team, and watch out for Illinois. I don't know if you've done a Big Ten thing yet, but I think the Illini could shock a lot of people. Um, but yeah, I think that's what it comes down to in a lot of ways. What our fans, everybody puts everything on paper and all this stuff, and you can do that all you want, but you got to go play the game. And I think some of the best teams that I've been a part of, you know, are small, guys with a chip on their shoulders that go out there. Like who is the best leaders at Arizona? Let's use that is, TJ McConnell for basketball. And then I say Scooby Wright. They weren't 5 stars, 6'6", guys that went out there but, TJ's still in the league, still taking his teams to finals and being that because he's that vocal leader. And I think leadership is so important for the best teams I've always been around are guys that are great leaders and that's what I think is you saw that last year with Notre Dame and then, with Ohio State too. They did have great when it went downhill. When they lost to Michigan, that was a new team. And when Notre Dame lost to NIU, that was a different team the rest of the year out. So that's what I think that you don't see that stuff that comes behind the scenes.
100%. I agree. Yeah, I know for me, I kind of look at this. Kansas State ended up in this tier because they were the Vegas favorites. So I was like, okay, Vegas is
They
on
are.
them. Yeah. Vegas has
Wow.
Kansas. That's a fun fact. Kansas State is Vegas's favorite to win the Big 12, which is completely surprising because all the talk has been Arizona State or Texas Tech. So that's why Kansas State got in this tier. Texas Tech, one thing that worries me about them is that road schedule can get pretty tough for them. They play games at Utah, at Arizona State, and then a place that's been, those are new locations that Texas Tech isn't used to playing. And then there's also at Kansas State, a location they had played at for a long time with very little success. So those could easily,
Those
I
are
wouldn't say,
very hard road games. Those are very hard road games. Just because they're hard, like ASU, I don't think it's so hard. Utah is really hard to play, and
yeah,
especially if Utah is good. Utah can get really rowdy and really. I feel like it's a lot like Texas Tech. Like they're similar kind of like environments where they're very underrated, very loud places to play. Uh, I think is that also I just think Kansas State is like that too. I won't give ASU any credit to their fans because we can't do that.
I'll give them credit. Their environment's tough when they're good. Um, yeah, good stuff. So we'll move on to the next tier here, the don't count them out tier. This is one where I think these teams are kind of recognized a little bit below the first three, but this is the Big 12. It's wide open. These teams definitely have a good shot. So of these two right now, which one would you pick right now that could make the Big 12 championship? Which one would you say is most likely to do that?
Man, I think both these teams are pretty good, and I think both their coaches are the top tier of the conference, maybe. I think Coach Sataki is just such a great coach, and and I love what he said. I put on Twitter about how we should all have a playoff, and all the teams should play each other, conferences, and who wins. I love his competitive nature. I think will put he has now all the talent with I think the money that is backing up BYU with wherever they're getting it. And we know where they're getting it, but no, I just think they do have the winning formula. They have guys up front they do lose a couple guys. Their edge guys, especially, were both really, really good, and then you got to look at that secondary. Their corner, like he had the most, I think he had one of the most interceptions in college football. So they do lose a couple pieces, but I think is that they have revamped, and I think they will be there in the end of the season, will be in the running. In Iowa State, we're back to the same conversation that I had. Can they score enough? I think BYU and Iowa State are both in that boat. Can they stretch the field enough to who can and who's playing quarterback for BYU right now? I don't know. And is he young? They just need a guy that is, and everybody puts this down on quarterbacks when you say a game manager. Like, it's not a bad thing being a game manager. Do not
Absolutely.
turn the ball over, manage the game. And I think if you look at Alabama's, season with, quarterbacks through the years, their best teams were not the ones with Tua and that. I think it's with McElroy, and then I think it's with McCarron. Those teams where those guys just did not make the mistake, put the offense in the right situation, ran the football, and I think that's what you're going to see with a BYU and Iowa State team. But can they make enough throws down the field to without turning the ball over?
Yeah, 100%. And I know with BYU entering last year, they were kind of struggling a little bit. And when I did my preview with them, I said, where did the physicality of this team go? It kind of fell off. And then they answered that bell in the best fashion last year. I saw them in the Alamo Bowl, and I just came away so impressed with their defense. It's not something that pops on TV, but when you see them in person, that defense flies around. They are fast. They play fast. They are physical. And even with those ends gone, I still think that defense is going to be really strong. If I had to go between the two, I would say BYU, and then I think the riskiest team in this tier is kind of it might be Iowa State just because they played a lot of one score games last year, and that's often how they play, which means you kind of play with fire a little bit. If you have a year where your team kind of gets in the funk and forgets how to win, you could be in a lot of trouble.
You got to think about it. 2 years ago, Iowa State lost to Ohio.
Yeah.
I mean, in Ohio. So, I mean, Iowa State 2 years ago, coach was almost on the hot seat, and everybody was like, "Coach, oh, like we need to, and now everyone is like, "Oh, now Iowa State has a chance." So it all depends year to year. Again, what we're back to is like, how does the beginning of the season? This is Iowa State's start of their season is just one of the, hardest in college football. Like the start is can they play at Kansas State, then they play South Dakota. South Dakota has the best FCS running back right now. Who, if you don't know him, he is unbelievable. And then they play
It,
Iowa.
yeah. Yeah, and then they go, oh, by the way, they go on the road to Arkansas State, a game that's
Yeah.
pretty similar to that road game at Ohio. So it does not get any easier. Every Iowa State can win any game in their schedule. They can also lose any game in their schedule.
So that first 3 game stretch, like if you lose two of those, you have to win the Big 12 or you're done. Does the Kansas State though, that doesn't count? That counts as a Big 12 game, the first one?
Yeah, that's a Big 12 game. They just moved it to week 0.
Because Arizona last year when they played Kansas State, that didn't count. I don't know if you
Yeah,
recall that.
yeah, that one doesn't count this year either.
We still couldn't win.
Realignment.
We still couldn't win. Jeez.
So we can move to the sleeper category here. So when you look at this one, these are still teams that could rise up and win the conference because this is the Big 12. It's a very competitive conference. Which one sticks out to you as a team that you think could end up pulling it all together and maybe even winning the Big 12 and crashing the playoff?
I'm really close with Coach Kenom, Baylor's running back coach, so he's going to be really mad at me from this pick. But I got to go with Utah out of these three. But I do think Baylor is really after last season, after that Colorado game, just really changed their. They had two things to do, and I talked to Coach Kenom about this, and I said, it shows what a great coach you are. And they had two things. They could have either quit and everything could have fell apart and coach could have been fired, or they could have gotten closer as a team together after that catastrophic loss. And they did the second option and they became a really good football team, and how many wins did they get in a row? A bunch. And all credit goes to Coach Kenom and that whole staff, and what because coach was in pretty, hot water there for a little bit, and I think that shows what a great culture they have built at Baylor to turn that season around and finish strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Things were not. I mean, you had the way the Colorado game ended, and I think it was the very next week they played BYU, and BYU shot off to like a huge lead, and it was like, man, this is getting bad really, really quick. And
Yeah.
they rallied in that BYU game, made it interesting. And I think that's kind of the point we saw in the middle of that game is where the team kind of started to turn the corner a little bit, and then they won. I think the rest of the season until their bowl game.
Yeah, like they won like six and and I think is that they ran the ball really. Their running backs had 1,000 yard. I think the first one in a while. I think is since they've gone more like the Coach Rule built team rather than the RG3 built teams in down there in Waco. And I think in today's game, when you do put five DBs on the field and everybody plays 7-on-7 in today's world, we are going back to old football, in my opinion, because players don't practice tackling. You also have an advantage of that when you do. Even see it with Ohio State. They were run heavy. It was
Yeah,
not, everyone says the great receivers. Yes, of course. But when you watch in the Ohio State Oregon game, watch those receivers block down the field. Those Oregon DBs could not get off a block and could not tackle in space. And that's what the point of this is. Let's go to Utah because that's how Utah has dominated the West for over a decade and a half, 2 decades, and has beat USC year after year after year. USC had 10 times the amount of athletes. Utah wins in the trenches, dominates up front, runs the ball, And last year, they didn't even have a quarterback. And now, I don't know if you guys have watched the kid from New Mexico.
Oh, Dampier, we're
This,
very well aware. We are huge fans of him. Yo, saw him in the opener against Arizona last year. I got back from watching Montana versus Missouri State, got back to the hotel room, and saw Dampier put on a show against Arizona, and I was like, this guy, cannot wait to watch him Mountain West After Dark the rest of the year. And he did not disappoint.
yeah, and he's from actually he's from Arizona. From he went to it starts with an S. Can't think of the name. They're going to be very mad at me in Phoenix. But
Scottsdale?
no, he went to SAG. I can't think of it. Saguaro.
Oh.
There you go. He went to
Oh, okay.
Saguaro. Yeah, and he just didn't have any offers really out of high school. He had, I think Arizona was his only one. I don't even think it was a committal. I mean, he's just a, but he's a he's a that is to, and I think in that, and the biggest question is, can he not, does he not turn the ball over again and take possessions out? You know, I think the hardest thing, and you see this with a lot of Washington State quarterbacks, is when they go to, because in that offense they do everything. He didn't have the team around him, but I think this year he will have that team around him. But sometimes guys try to push too much and do everything like they were doing before, and it's okay to throw the ball away. It's okay to, and I think sometimes you do see that with guys that are big time players. You saw that last year with Miami's guy from Washington State at times, the number one
Right.
overall pick. He would just force the ball down the field, and it's a turnover, and you couldn't do that. Like he did that against Cal, but they found a way to come back. So I think those things are, how can you make, don't make a great play and then make a bad play, because the bad play is a catastrophic play is worse than the great play, because that's, you got to be able to put and let the play in the means of your game. So that's the way I see it for them with Utah, and I think Utah could win this conference in my opinion. I think this BYU Utah game is going to be the best holy war in a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. That
Like,
game is going to be a lot of fun. It is a shame it's not on rivalry week because I don't know what
is it
we're doing
not?
there at the Big 12. No, it's in the middle of October. And actually, kind of talk about the tier above. The worst scheduling move I've seen so far was BYU plays in the Holy War, then has to hit the road the very next week to play Iowa State in Ames. And Iowa State's coming off a bye week.
The problem is though, if you don't, with this conference, in my opinion, that comes down is we're not going in the SEC. Everyone will be like, "Oh, it's the hardest conference," right? If everybody beats each other up, if everybody beats each other up in this conference, everybody is going to say, "Oh, well, it's not as good as the SEC." Look at the top tier, especially if they do badly in the out of conference. And
Yeah,
that's what it
absolutely.
comes down to. I think like there are some really big games like Colorado, Georgia Tech, those out of conference, West Virginia, Pitt. I'm guessing they play each other this year, did they not?
Yep, week 3. And then Baylor versus Auburn is the one that I really have circled. Like, you have a home game against the SEC team, got them in your house. Baylor, you got to get that job done.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
think it especially after how well last year went against LSU.
yeah,
That was not good.
that
That
was
was
a
not.
painful game because it was like Baylor kept breaking like big plays, and then all of a sudden the flag would show up and take it back.
Even
That was
Texas Tech, Arkansas was abysmal. I was
yeah,
just like, what is happening? So
yeah.
those are the things I would say, but I think, and I have no idea what to expect from Kansas.
Yeah, so I'll chime in with the Kansas one here. This team actually has my interest a little bit because we talked about earlier. You have a rough go to start the year, and sometimes that thing can spiral. They last year went on the road, played a much better than expected Illinois team. Jalen Daniels has some turnovers in that game, and the offense was just a click off for most of the season. You know how sometimes, as a former coach, you probably have preached sometimes, it's a
I've
game
actually
of inches
coached
and everything
against
like
him.
that. Yeah,
I actually
and
coached
it's
against
live.
that staff when they were at Buffalo, and I
Ooh,
was at
yes.
Temple, and we just beat Maryland, beat Georgia Tech, and then lost to freaking Buffalo. It was the most degrading thing. No, he's a great coach. I think last year a lot of it is, they were doing a lot of running, not running the ball, and that's how what he did at Buffalo, with all the great running backs that he had at Buffalo. And I think is last year they they got away from that bread and butter, and he put more on his quarterback and more pressure on throwing the ball, and it led to a lot more turnovers,
Right.
costly turnovers at times, which took them out of football games. But at the end of the day, when you watch them play Colorado, they play great,
Yeah.
and
No,
they,
three straight Big 12 top 25
yeah.
wins. By November, they all of a sudden became a buzzsaw when they focused back on running the ball. It was a very weird situation because they lost Kolonicki to Penn State, and they brought in Jeff Grimes to like run his offense, and that's where I've kind of felt like there was just some discomfort there, and that's where that
So
situation happened. I
they
don't know what they did
so they just
in
gave
November.
Baylor's like, we don't want him. Hey, take him, and then Baylor's offense just went to. So I'm kidding.
Jeff Grimes went to
No,
Wisconsin this year, so take with that how you may. But yeah, they did something. The switch flipped in November for this team, and they started winning ball games. They focused on running the ball, and I'm looking at them this year. I think they'll continue with that. And Daniel Highshaw is a really good running back. I think he's going to be a guy who's going to star for them. I'll tell you what. I think Kansas is actually going to be in the thick of this thing.
you do.
Yeah, yeah. They were so many one score losses last year, and I think what we saw in November is going to be more like what we see out of this team. That's kind of one of my bold predictions from this conference.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like when we played that team or Buffalo, they had a guy named Jared Patterson who I know
But
pretty well
yes,
today, and
Jared
man,
Patterson, absolute legend.
he still plays for in the NFL. Actually, a lot of people don't know he still plays for the Chargers, and just one of the greatest people out there. And big shout out to Jared, if he's watching, or maybe I'll send it to him. But they establish that line of scrimmage and just give him the rock and do it in different ways. And it was a run first, pass second. And I think last year Kansas in the beginning season was a pass for just outthinking themselves. And I think when you have all
Absolutely.
these new parts, running the football is the answer because everybody knows their assignment. And I think a lot of times today, you have to make the playbook smaller in a lot of ways because you don't have the time to, you got to realize how many hours these kids are there and you're having so many new pieces. And it's just really hard to have a complexity. And I think you see that a lot with Auburn and coach running all these RPOs. If it's one miss RPO where the receiver runs the wrong route because okay, it's a different look on defense, or the quarterback, or hand it off, or what, everybody has to do their part. And if one person messes it up, that play is fully off, because of it, is it too high one, and all these different things come into play. And I think early on when you're not doing that and you're necessarily, okay, this is an easy read to make, do this, do that. If you have more talent, you have bigger people than the other people around on the other side, that's going to help you out more than I like when you watch Ohio State's scheme in the end of the year, it was pretty basic. I work with one of the NIU quarterback from Dartmouth, and he was at the Rose Bowl game, and he was like really shocked. He was like, "This simplicity of this Ohio State game, like they're not even, it wasn't even complex, but they just had more talent than everybody else. They don't have to make it, they don't have to out scheme the other person,
Right.
in a sense. They got 10 times the amount of talent. They got receivers everywhere. They got running backs. They got a huge offense. So those are the things I would say for Kansas is how, or just any team, even Arizona. Like when I watched Arizona last year, it was almost too complex. Like, and Fafita was doing too much. He didn't check down the ball. Everybody would run cover three against him when they went to the 40-yard line. I always tweeted about that. So different things, even TCU. Um, So many of these programs, so many of these things, when you have so many moving pieces, and look at the teams that weren't moving, that had everybody come back pretty much, is Notre Dame, Army, Navy. They all had 10 wins because they've all been in that same scheme for 4 years, 2, 3, 4 years. They know where they have to be. But necessarily, if you look at LSU, if you look at Auburn, they had all the talent. It's not a talent problem. It's more of a where what are we how do you mold together? So just because you have more talent doesn't mean necessarily that you're going to have more wins, which you're seeing
Absolutely.
throughout college football right now. You think that a lot of people don't realize that Vanderbilt team all was from New Mexico State. Half that team, they all played together for 2, 3 years, and they went into the SEC and won 8, 9 games or
Yeah,
seven. I don't know,
seven, 7 games. But yeah,
seven
like
games.
brought like a bunch of the players, brought the offensive coordinator, head coach, like all of those guys all came over. And that's why sometimes I think the portal becomes popular because it's like, oh, we could bring in these guys and change it. One of the early portal examples was bringing in Bailey Zappi, his offensive coordinator, and a bunch of other guys from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky, and then they set the passing yards record. Well, that's because you brought in all of the guys and the scheme together and they were all on the same page. You basically just took in those those guys who knew what they were doing, put them behind the FBS offensive line, and things worked great. But otherwise, you're trying to do all this stuff in the portal, and there is a missing element for a lot of teams that a lot of people aren't talking about, where it is about the teamwork and just knowing what you're doing on a given play.
Yeah, and as we go down to the chaos teams, to the Gundy searching, I think all of these teams, they're very hard to predict because you don't know what they have and you don't know who's going to come out. You could have Golden Tate, or you could have, the next like Khalil Mack in there that played D2, right? Or,
Right.
somebody that a lot of people don't know is Hassan Reddick was a walk-on defensive back at Temple. Um, to one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, taking the Eagles to a Super Bowl. So or Deion Dawkins, offensive lineman, one of the best offensive tackles in the league. So a lot of guys come from really, really um, not the best, high recruits, or people pass them up, or maybe they didn't go to all these recruiting rankings. I think they're really high school based, where you went to high school. How do you pass the eye test? The best
Right.
players, a lot of
Eye
them
test.
have, yeah, the small players that are just like these guys that know where to be, right? The Scooby Wrights of the world that are just play at the game at a different level. Those guys really become great, great players. RG3 picked Baylor over Stanford because Stanford, he wouldn't have maybe played quarterback. Um, so you don't know. So I think a lot of these teams, they're harder to predict than people think. I think especially West Virginia's a whole new team. Colorado, like, that's, I don't care who you are to replace those guys. Uh, those are really hard guys to replace. University of Houston is really big shout out to Coach Giles. I work with him at West Virginia. I mean at Wyoming. He's my mentor. He's the D line coach, and he was the D line coach at Texas. He played at Texas, and he got the stop for against USC in the final. So he was the D line coach, and they're going to be really big. Built like a SEC defense and built like a big offensive line. That's what Coach did at Tulane, running the ball really well. And then TCU, I think TCU's in some trouble, to be honest. I think Coach Avalos, has to have a big year defensively. I mean, because if not, I don't see TCU in that first game against North Carolina. If they lose that game in
It,
Chapel
it,
Hill, I
it
think you're in. I think
yeah.
they'll be out.
It could get pretty ugly pretty quick if they lose that one. And in general, TCU is one of those teams that you really I put them in this category because they have some talent. Like they have a really good quarterback, but you're just having a pass game. Can you run the ball like that? That's going to it sets TCU up to be a team that can maybe upset a team that's higher up in the conference. But at the same time, how many games they're going to lose because they can't run it.
Yeah, I don't know who they can stop. I don't know, like, I mean, even when you watch the Cal game last year, I but Cal turned out to be a lot better than people thought. So it's really hard to say what are they going to be. But when you get to those third and fourth quarters and you have to be able to run the ball, you cannot go and just have big plays and the game never ends. You
Right.
see so many of these spread offenses. You've seen it with Oklahoma through the last 15 years, where the game is never over. I don't care if you had Bradford or you went all the way up to, you know, to a few years ago, that you have to be able to run the ball and kill the clock and have your defense go out there and go in cover two and have two safeties back and don't let anything get behind me with a 14, 15 point lead and not turn the ball over. And I mean, even if you look at the TCU, UCF game, they should not have won that game. I mean, they should not have beaten UCF last year when that happened. I mean, UCF
Wait,
just
did it happen the other
the
way around? Where was it where
oh
TCU blew it because
UCF
they couldn't
won.
run the ball?
UCF won.
Yeah,
Oh, did UCF
you
win?
had the right mindset. It was just the opposite
But
way where
oh, okay.
TCU had
Well,
a
it's like
34 or
TCU
14
should have
lead.
won. TCU
Yeah,
should have won that game. Like those are games that you have to win, and especially at home. It
yeah,
was at home,
absolutely.
right?
At
And
home against UCF, who went on to win 4 games.
yeah, I mean those are just, and it seems like these high power West Coast offenses, and you see it with Lane, and you see it with Sarkeesian when you are not in. You can't outscore the opponent every game. And that those
100%.
are and that's what I see with a lot of people don't realize. Everyone says Ohio State's offense last year. Ohio State got 3 stops on fourth down within the 1 yard line. Penn State, Texas, and then also Nebraska. 3 huge stops where they changed the entire complexity of the game, and those are big plays that you have. Defense wins championships, offense wins games. I'm always believe that. Oregon has not won a national championship because they've been built on offense. And when they could not beat Stanford because they could not kick field goals, and they did not beat Washington a year ago because they decided to go for it 18 times inside the 10-yard line. I don't know why anyone would do that at the end of the half and not take points. If they take 6 points, they win that game by 3. That last field goal doesn't happen. And if you pass up on your field goal kicker and then ask him, hey, go out there and kick it, I mean, it's all mental game. That's what I coach with
Yeah,
special teams. So those are kind of the things that are not on in this, in that's not on the stat sheet, right? Necessarily, or how much
absolutely.
talent you have. Why, who do you think from the chaos teams will have the way to rise up to the top?
I'm looking at Houston. So for one, they brought in a few interesting transfers. I like the coaching staff there. I agree with you on that. The defense was already good. Where they had opportunity to improve was on offense. Their offense, now we're talking about again, like, one of those kind of hidden stats a little bit. Their offense ranked dead last in red zone percentage last year. They changed the offensive coordinator and everything like that. New scheme kind of going in there. I think going more to what Willie Fritz is used to having with his teams. And I think that's going to allow this team to really make a huge step up. Like they were competitive in games, even with an offense that stunk in the red zone. Now, get back to being even competent, and there's a lot more wins on the table for this team.
Yeah, I just think I coached against him at Tulane and Willie Fritz, and just the staff, they're just like such a great staff, just great people too. And I think they build the relationships with so many great people, and they're going to recruit Louisiana and Texas, which I mean, from a talent standpoint, those standards also, not saying Houston's not a good school, so don't, but Tulane is a very high academic school, which it's hard to get kids into. And I think that did also was a reason maybe he left too, is because he doesn't
Yeah,
have to get those such high academic kids in, and he's in a better conference. But you have to realize, a lot of people don't realize our 2019 conference of American when we were all coaching at Temple, we had our whole front seven played in the NFL from Temple, like at least played one game. At Cincinnati, they, were unbelievable. SMU was really, really good. Memphis and SMU had game day. Memphis went and played Penn State in
Right.
a in a power or at BCS game, I
That
think.
was the
And
Cotton Bowl, right? I think, and
yeah,
and
and
that was
then
with the interim
UCF.
coach. Like,
No, oh, did he already leave? Oh, I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah, Norvell left, so the interim coach coached the bowl game, so we didn't really get a good read on how that went. But all I know is like that Memphis team put like 4 running backs in the NFL or something ridiculous like that. So
Yeah, I mean, Gain. Everyone asked me who'd my like the most like player that when you watch were just like I think Gainwell might be like he doesn't look the part, but then when he's out there, he's just so can do it all, pass, like catch it. I mean, he's just such a hard. So it'll be interesting to see how he does with the Steelers this year. But yeah, he's from Mississippi too, and per capita, Mississippi actually produces the most NFL players out of any state. Fun fact.
really, how
Yeah.
about that? I learned something new today.
But yeah, so those are those like so he's been in places where he hasn't been the best, in the best situation. He turned that Tulane program right around real quickly. In a 4 or 5, 3, 4 years back then, that was pretty quickly. I guess
he
today
he
that's not.
changed he
Yeah,
changed Tulane completely. Like Tulane
yeah,
was a football dead zone when he got there. Now they are one of the top programs in the American and a consistent playoff threat every single year.
yeah. I wish that they got to play LSU in 2021. I wish.
Oh my, that would have been so great. Oh,
Imagine
that would have
if
been
they
great.
won. Imagine if they won. Just the LSU fans. Oh, that would have been so amazing. That
The
would have been
Tiger Rag going to Tulane. Oh, that'd be so great.
But
But closing out in Houston, you talked about the recruiting. 5-star quarterback coming in, so you can already see that
oh,
kind of
they
kicking
do.
in.
They
Yeah,
do.
not this year, but I think 2026 class.
Well, that doesn't matter yet. I mean, I don't know why you guys get
Yeah,
so
that is
hyped by
true.
these recruiting classes. They
we
whoever got
we
more
don't.
money kind of no, just like fans. Just like
Yeah,
I just think this isn't recruit like people say to me like, "Oh, well, Ohio State's coach and Texas coach and Sarkisian and all these guys are great recruiters or Oregon." This is not recruiting. This is whoever has the most money is going to win. And from being around coaches at the lower levels, we don't have that money. We don't have like what who do you call it is doing at Temple right now, coach. He's doing a great job of recruiting, but we don't have he's actually recruiting because we don't have that money resources to give versus and I think another thing my last point about recruiting is I think coaches are going to start realizing and not go take jobs at a Big 12 team where they don't have the resources. Like they're better off staying at Temple and have or Boise State and have a chance to make the playoff in a league where they're better than everybody else versus if they go to say, I don't know, Cincinnati. Cincinnati's competing with $68 million of Texas Tech roster. How can they possibly beat that team? When
it'll be
Texas
tough.
Tech can That's what I mean though. It's more difficult, but if you're at Memphis, you have more money than Cincinnati does, but you're playing Tulane like how you're playing Tulane every year. And if you win that and you're the best group of five, you have a better chance of making the playoff than you do if you're that's why it mind boggles to me. Why wouldn't USC just have stayed in the Pac-12? They would
Yeah,
have
I
made the
know.
playoff every year. Now they have to go
Right.
play Ohio State, Michigan, and I don't care what deal you
It's
get.
because they and obviously we'll keep this part short because we're trying to talk about the product
Yeah,
on the field, but they thought they could just go and take the money and then try to take all the playoff spots too. Is basically what their plan was.
crazy to me.
Yeah. We'll
What
close this
about
out here.
Colorado?
Oh yeah, so Colorado. One thing I think is interesting about Colorado is their offensive line really struggled for a few years, but I actually think we're going to see some improvement up there. They finally have some continuity. Last 2 years, it's been an entirely new front five. This year, most of their starters are back, and they're actually talented players too. So I think we're looking at Colorado actually finally having a decent offensive line.
I personally think this is his last season in Colorado. I think that you're gonna have either Norvell or you're gonna have, sorry to get off the field stuff, but if it doesn't go well, I think it could be, and I think that Georgia Tech game is really gonna be an interesting one because I think
Yeah,
it either Colorado wins of or I think Georgia Tech just absolutely beats the living, like they just will physically dominate them. And the two teams that Colorado has played last year that actually had a front seven, they got absolutely destroyed. Nebraska and then BYU. They got absolutely pummeled and they have to win up front. Yet even their best win from last year, in my opinion, is North Dakota State. That's their best win from last year. They didn't really play anybody. They didn't have that hard of a schedule. Um, and I think that it would have been a different team, everyone would have a different view of them if they had a harder schedule, but not taking away anything from Coach Prime. Coach Prime's done an unbelievable
yeah.
job there. Same thing with ASU, but anytime you do say anything bad about Colorado, the whole Colorado fans are going to come after me here. But I do think their schedule was very easy and very not. I think it would have been a different team if they had to play BYU. They didn't have to play. They didn't. I don't even think they played ASU last year.
They didn't. They did
They
avoid that
didn't.
one too, which was funny because like you entered the season. This is kind of where the thing is again about preseason projections. You entered the season, look at their schedule, it's like, ooh, this looks pretty tough, and they don't get to play Arizona State or BYU, who are projected at the bottom of the conference, and then it
Oh yeah,
turns
the
out to be a
BYU
good
too.
thing that they avoided them.
But
So
Utah
now
didn't have a quarterback. Utah didn't have a quarterback. Arizona was. I mean, they were checked out by that time, and I think I Arizona was just really had five players on their whole team. So I mean, that really didn't, and it was so they didn't play that many people. Teams. I think NDSU, you have to also realize everyone's like, oh, Colorado's second year. Well, it was Coach's first year at NDSU because I coached with Coach when he was the OC at Wyoming. Um, and he did a great job, and congratulations on that national championship, another one. But I would love to
yeah,
see NDSU come up to one of these conferences. And I think if you put NDSU, a team like that, in the Big 12, they would make some noise.
they would. I have a buddy that works at Colorado, and I asked him, at the end of the year, I was like, when you guys, obviously, I hung out with him down, on the river walk at San Antonio after the game and stuff, and I was like, you guys had a big battle there at North Dakota State. Like, how would you say that they would be like a middle tier, at least Big 12 team? And he was like, yeah, that team was a legitimate Big 12 team that they went up
Yeah,
against.
I mean, and I also think NDSU would have won if it was in the later in the season. I think if
Yeah,
they just didn't know what they had, and I mean they knew what they had, but I think early on your first game to coach, you're coaching against in Boulder, and I just think NDSU is just such a perfect fit. What the Big 12 can't stop is the run and
yeah,
winning up front. So for me, I really do. And to get back to the run, we're getting into West Virginia, I guess, and I think you're going to see with that team. I have no idea what to expect, but with Rich Rod, you never know. He really is a phenomenal coach and has been doing it for years, running that same scheme. And I think something that people don't realize, if you break down his scheme, it's all about numbers and all about how many people are in the box. And the reads are so easy to make offensively. And he puts his players in the best situation to succeed. And that's my difference between him and RPO coaches, where a lot of these RPOs are so complicated, and what him is really easy. It's when he was at Arizona, it didn't matter who was playing quarterback. The offense was still pretty decent from quarterback to quarterback, and he was doing it with three-star guys, not with everybody remembers Khalil Tate, but Khalil Tate wasn't the guy that took them to a bowl game. It was a true freshman that took them to play
yeah.
Boise State, who
Anu
eventually went to
Sullivan.
Baylor. Yep. So those are kind of, I do think that he could. make some, but defensively, I just don't know how many stops they'll be able to get.
Yeah, this is a team I kind of look at, and I know how Rich Rod's teams usually work. They kind of get better as the year goes on. This is a team that I put in this tier just because they might end up being a huge problem in the Big 12 in November. And if you were to look at the November schedule, they play a lot of the top contenders. This team very much has like a potential of being a similar to 2024 Kansas, where they lose some games early. Maybe they lose at Ohio. Maybe they lose to Pitt. And then they turn around and mess up the Big 12's hopes of multiple bids to the playoff because they upset, some of the top teams that they play.
So you think they could be like a Kansas from last year?
Yeah, where they pull some late season upsets that just completely mess up the Big 12's hope of playoff bids.
I think for them to do that, I think they're going to need to be in shootouts where your old West Virginia early after Rich Rod, even when Rich Rod was there, but when Rich Rod was there, they didn't lose the shootouts usually. Pitt, that game was low scoring, but I would say after Rich Rod left with Austin and all those teams when they'd play Texas and the games would be 55 to 53. I could see that with a Colorado. I could see that with an ASU. I could see that with a TCU. I think that TCU WVU game will be have a lot of points in it in
A
October
lot of
25th.
points.
If you like a lot of points, you should turn that game on. But Pitt is just too good front seven wise. This Pitt front seven is really, really good. I just don't see how you can possibly. And can he not lose the team after you play Pitt, you play Kansas, then you play Utah, then you play BYU? Those are really hard. Back to the can he not lose the locker
the
room and
game
can
the game at
everybody?
Ohio is tricky too. Like it's tough early on, but this is Rich Rod. Like if he's lost a player, they'll just get thrown to the bench, and the next guy will step up. I think this team's going to play hard.
Yeah, I mean, and you also have to say is when they played Memphis last year, they played them pretty well in that bowl game. Memphis is a very, very good team last year, and
Yeah,
they beat Florida State. They still have some talent on that team, and just a lot of, again, back to that Penn State game, they were in it until they went for it on fourth down early on in the game, and it's a completely different game. So you don't know, and it depends on decisions. But I think he's going to be very aggressive because he knows he's going to have to score points and outscore the opponent. So I think you'll see him go for it a lot on fourth down and be aggressive. So I think they'll be a very fun, and he wants to get back that culture built back in West Virginia, which I don't think in Morgantown has been there for the last 4 years. And who do they have that even is an NFL talent? I mean, I couldn't name one on their team right now, and that's what I do for a living. Uh, so I represent players. So I think they've lost a lot, but at the same time, if you look at, for example, the Buffalo Bills, who do they have offensively that's a wide receiver or something? Josh Allen won his MVP when he didn't have those star wide receivers because he was taking care of the ball more, being cognizant, just not throwing it up into triple coverage, being more conservative with it. And I think sometimes when you don't have those stars, you're better off. Like it was almost with Arizona's where's T-Mac every time and just throwing his way. So I do think that those things could help them out, but their schedule is really difficult and it starts with just rebuilding that culture, I would say, in learning how to win. Learning
yeah,
how to win is a thing. I think
absolutely.
you could see a lot of games where they just let them go down, but I guess to the Gundy now. Oklahoma State. What do you think Oklahoma State's going to do?
So this is why I made this category because on paper there's really not a whole lot of continuity here. They changed a lot, but this is Mike Gundy. He could very well end up managing to find a decent season out of this, right?
Yeah, I know a couple guys are going to go play there that are transfers. They got a guy who played a D end who played at Tennessee, who I'm really close with, who played JC last year, and he's a dog. They got also another guy I'm close with who's a DB, UCLA corner, one of the best corners from last year. I think that defense actually got some really good guys that are not necessarily that people won't know, but are a couple like really good players. I think it has been changing at Oklahoma State for the last few years. He's not been that offensive, firepower, great where they scored, 60 points. It's been more defensively, and his whole defensive coordinator now at Penn State left for Ohio State. You saw that defense last year. Those were kind of the teams what they had over the last few years. Super, but can the offense make some strides this year? Even in that BYU game, they looked really good last year. They just didn't make a couple plays and didn't finish BYU off. And I think they are a few steps. And I think that off the field stuff really with the comments of the drunk driving and I who hasn't drunk really did not help the situation and took a lot of noise away from the program and that you have to deal with because you're talking about other things and not focusing on football. And especially in a social media world today, that can be really difficult, all that kind of stuff. So
Absolutely.
I so I think a lot of ways they were like Utah last year, where a couple plays away and a couple things, if their quarterback, the quarterback situation last year wasn't too good, Utah's quarterback situation, but defensively they weren't horrible. Um, it was more offensively just being able to, and not just defensively not bad, but just letting up plays, costly big plays at bad times. Like where you can't let it, like BYU, they let up a ton of big plays in the last 3 minutes
And
or
what? It
five
was
minutes.
like there was like what, like a long touchdown, I think, with like 10 seconds left that gave
I
that
couldn't
BYU
imagine.
won on.
I couldn't imagine being a coach in that situation. Just like,
Oh,
oh my, like, how do we let this happen? Literally just have two guys back, and just don't let anything get behind us. And they
yeah,
let
absolutely.
something get behind us. And I think Baylor did the same thing against Colorado. Just it, man, those are the most devastating losses when you lose like that. Just because it's just like you shouldn't have, and then you turn on the film and you're like, how did we lose that? So those are kind of things that it's not like basketball, where you get 50 games and then you still get to the tournament and maybe you can make some noise in the tournament. I guess the tournament last year wasn't that, but you know. No, but I'm just saying, I just really do believe that it's really hard to tell what you think is going to come from Oklahoma State because you don't know. There's a lot of what ifs.
Absolutely. There's a lot of things that could work out, and next thing you know, we're seeing Gundy get the team back to like 8-4, or maybe even better than that, or
Do you
maybe the new pieces don't work out, and we see them fade to the bottom of the conference. There's really a lot of
do you
mysteries.
think do you think he's on the hot seat this season?
I don't know. Like they had the standoff, the on 3 graphic that had the standoff in the giant bold print there. So they had a standoff, which tells me they're probably on. He's probably on some sort of hot seat, if I had to guess.
I think he is. I think that he has to get to 7 or 8 wins. I think eight would be he would. I just think before he was winning with all the off the field stuff which he had, and I think he's a great coach. But if he needs to be cognizant of when he says stuff, in my opinion, because universities today are looking for a reason to not pay you and fire
Yeah,
you. And I think you've seen that at multiple places. I think Rich Rod at Arizona, like they didn't pay him uh, because of what happened in that situation. I don't know what happened or what did happen, but you're seeing them in all sorts of situations, and I think he really does need to be cognizant. And him and the AD have been, I don't know if it's a new AD, but they've been going at it for years with, he didn't have high enough recruiting classes. And he took shots at him about that. So they've always been like tectonic plates of why can't we get the players OU gets, and he's been a great coach. But at the same time, how do you fire a guy like that that's went there that has been doing such a great job over the last 20 years ever he took over for Les Miles, I think, back in the day, right? Like he's
Yeah,
been there a
yeah,
long time.
and I saw a stat the other day. He is like 20% of Oklahoma State's all time wins over Oklahoma.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
That's ccrazy. So it's like,
it
how do you
nuts.
fire a guy like that? And I
Right,
always talk about loyalty, and he is the epitome of loyalty. Like
100%.
he's been there. Everybody wants to leave now, and I mean, he's been there through the thick and thin, and it's just so hard to win for so many years. I don't care who you are, or if you're Nick Saban, or you're the guy, Division three. I mean, once you start to see that with Kirby Smart a little bit, he won two or three, national championships. It's pretty hard to win eight national, like to be that dominant. And I think it shows with how great of a job he's done at Oklahoma State for years. But I also think his fan bases get greedy. Where okay, we got won 7 games, we should win at Arizona. We should win. Well, we won 9 games with Rich Rod. We should win 9 games a year, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, when has anybody ever done that at Arizona? So that's also, it's really hard to keep winning every year, especially in a transfer portal world where every year you lose a player every year now. So that's the big difference. But all right, for searching for a bowl game, who do you think has the best chance out of these three?
mine is probably Cincinnati just because they were so close last year. Uh, Ordsby played really well for most of the year, but eventually it broke because he didn't have much for receivers to throw to. I think this year they actually, we talked a little bit about smaller school guys who move up and can end up being big playmakers. They got a few of those
All
at
three of these
receiver.
schools have done all three of these schools have done that. They're
Yeah,
Because if you look down and you break out, sorry to interrupt, but all three of these schools probably have the least amount of money than the rest, I would say. Do you agree with that?
yeah, I would agree with that. Especially UCF might actually have a lot of cash sitting around. So I maybe not them, but
Really?
at least Cincinnati and Arizona because yeah, UCF has a lot of support these days and a large alumni base. Since I mean, and keep in mind, like when you're comparing these teams to even some of the ACC teams, like these teams still have a lot of money, but Cincinnati has a lot of support here in Cincinnati. Arizona, I think the problem for them is they are a top basketball school, and that becomes a problem in this new era where they are focusing a lot on basketball and then maybe not paying as much attention to football.
Yeah, I think is the Arizona, just from being an alum and through the years, just the athletic program and just a lot of West Coast teams. You live in a very leftist world. I'm not trying to get into politics, but every sport matters and give each sport and the SEC is not really like that. The SEC gave football and built all this and put all their money into football, and I think Arizona has put it into I never in Cal put all their money into I never even knew that was a sport. Give them money, but football pays the bills. If you like it or not, basketball doesn't really pay that many bills, and football is where you need to put money. Because I think in the early 2000s there was an article about Ohio State, how Ohio State's football program pays for all of their athletics and pays for their school for how much revenue they bring in. And that's the factual evidence. And it's not me being a anti-feminist, whatever. It's me saying where is what is going to. And if you want to win in this day and age, you have to put money in to get money out. And I think Arizona has not done that over the last 10 years, 20 years, and Oregon has.
Yeah,
USC always
absolutely.
have. And that's the biggest thing. But for me, I would say out of these teams, I think Arizona could surprise a few teams. I do not think they're going to get 2 wins. I've seen a lot of people say they're going to go 2-10. That's not going to happen. I would be very shocked if that happened. Out of these three, I think UCF has the biggest to climb up from where they were left off. Cincinnati, I think Cincinnati and Arizona are big what ifs because they could be really bad and they could be really good. You know,
Yeah,
uh, there's not an in between kind of way I see it. I think it comes down to Arizona not turning the ball over in red zone offense. And I think the same thing with Cincinnati. Their red zone offenses were not the best last year. And I think also on the front seven, can they stop people? Can you
Right.
stop the run? You can't have nine guys in the box,
Yeah,
to
100%.
stop.
And Cincinnati did a pretty good job early in the year. Where we started to see it fall off was they didn't have the depth. Injuries kind of hit a little bit, and that's where Cincinnati kind of fell off there after the 5-2 start. And the interesting thing I know down here in Cincinnati is the play calling is something that always gets questioned. So that'll be kind of one of the things to watch there when it comes to the red zone offense. But Arizona, they have Noah Fafita quarterback. He's really good. I like what they did with their portal moves. They got the running back out of Texas State. He's going to help give them a run game because we saw their offense do really well against New Mexico in the opener when they had a running back, and then that whole fiasco with the NCAA happens, and we never see their offense look the same when they didn't have their running back anymore. So they got a running back in this kid from Texas State who's going to be really good, and I have a hard time pronouncing his name, so I'm not going to put it on here. But
Yeah, I know.
that along with the returning production, I kind of like what Arizona could do too.
I I think Arizona fans going to get really mad at me about this, but it was not a coincidence when Arizona played ANIU last year and almost lost. Arizona had no depth. They put money into seven guys, and they all were DBs and wide receivers and had one tackle. That's not going to get the job done. And I think what Arizona really did, and I said it all year, and all the Arizona people called me, I don't know anything about football. They know more than I do. Coach Brennan came out at the end of the season and said, I said it, we don't have anybody up front and we're getting dominated in the trenches and you cannot win that way. I don't care who you are. Coach Brennan said at the end of the year, we added, I think, like 2,000 or 3,000 pounds just of people up front from D2, FCS, and all different levels. And that's where it starts. If you can't protect Fafita, you can't win. I don't care if you got Peyton Manning back there. That's what it comes down to. And I think with Fafita, he was trying to do too much last year. And you can't win a lot of games. Even that Utah game, when they did win on those amazing passes, a guy can't do that week in and week out
Yeah,
and make those. And they had one wide receiver and everybody else, they didn't have any separation. And I think this year they have a lot more depth where different guys can make plays, which is a huge thing. It's really hard to just have one guy that you just are going to throw the ball to every play and just be like, okay, I hope he's going to go up and get it. And that was the difference. I think the people around Fafita need to help him out, and I want to see Fafita's leadership skills this year. Because this is his team now, and he needs to go out there and show it. And he's a really great kid. His dad, I've known his dad for a while, and their family, and they're a great family. And it's great to see him coming back to U of A, and uh, hopefully we can have a decent year with UCF. I think that you're starting over from it was a run-based offense last year. And now you're going to go back to the spread of your early 2000s UCF of it will be interesting to see, does he just go fully fast like he did at Oregon and he did at UCF where they go 1,000 miles an hour.
right.
That will be very interesting. And we got our old American matchup right here with Cincy and UCF because they were going at it for years. But yeah, I think Arizona has the best, and I'm not just saying that as an Arizona alum. I just think they have more of the depth, but I don't think the Arizona faithful believe in Coach Brennan at all. And I think Coach Brennan is a great coach. He was at San Jose State he did a great job there. He was at Oregon State as a receiver coach, and he's a phenomenal person too. And can he win over that? Because if they lose a few in the beginning, the walls are going to be coming tighter. Everybody's going to be tight, and I think it's the same thing with Cincinnati. Is everybody going to be, on? It's really hard to go, especially in a social media world where everybody's documenting
Yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
and the kids are like, F this, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Like, this sucks. When we didn't have people at practice. You weren't allowed to come to practice when I was coaching. Today, like, we have documentaries on practice where they're there. Oh, what did you think of that one-on-one drill? With the like their interview. Have you seen that? They have them on ESPN now. Like, they have the like
I
camp. They
it's
have
it's
camps.
too much.
It's like,
Oh,
bro,
it's
can
too
we like
much.
have a practice without you being here? Like, so those are the things that I would say. So who do you think is going to be the biggest surprise of the Big 12 this year?
My biggest surprise, I'm going with Utah. I'm sticking with my pick of Utah.
Me too. I think I'm surprised that they are a really a surprise though. That's why I was like I wouldn't have gone. I don't think that's a huge surprise. I think for me, I think since you have Arizona so way down, I think Arizona will. I think they might make a bowl game. They might. I don't know if they will. It depends how the. But the beginning of their season, the early season, is really nice. To be honest, it's just that they have a 4 game stretch. Um, they have a 4 game stretch, which I think will be really difficult. Which I mean, they start at home against Hawaii, then they play Weber State, but then they have Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State,
It, it,
BYU.
it gets
Then
it gets brutal in a hurry.
yeah, but it's so hard because you don't know who's going to be really like that's why the schedule is really difficult. And are you against these power conferences because it's almost like it's almost whoever gets the easiest draw.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is where the problem you get when the conferences have officially gotten they've hit the point where they're too big. They are simply too
Yeah,
big. We need to get back down to 10 or 12, based on
that's how I
region, and
think
just
too.
go from there. But
I,
I guess, sorry, I'll let you get that last point
No,
in.
it's if we had it in 2007, this college football playoff where you had the Big East, you had all these conferences, you had it all spread out, the wealth, you would be able to pick who are the best teams and there should be no, but the conferences have too much power. They have more power than the NCAA does. And everything's about what conference, who conference it is. And I think even when I see, which I really love about your podcast and what you guys do is, you're not on one side even if you are a Cincinnati fan or I see so many people in the SEC or the Big 12, like, oh, we're the best, we're this. You know, how do you point it where I'm an Arizona guy, I don't think we're going to go win a national championship because that's not going to happen. That's not
Absolutely.
realistic. And just because you went to Georgia doesn't mean Georgia. I got so much crap from the Georgia fans when I said Notre Dame would win, and I was, right. But no, I just think is like, how do we make it where there's too many sites where everybody has a site and it's almost taking away from reality. And that's how I feel like, why don't we have all these conferences play each other and do all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Put it on the field instead of trying to win it in these. I want to say courtrooms, but I don't know if that's exactly it. Where conference rooms or whatever they're trying to do these days. It definitely, it's definitely a lot. But as it continues to get dark on me here, we have hit that point in the summer where it rapidly gets dark earlier. Apparently, that caught me by surprise today. So I'm continuing to disappear as the show goes on.
No, you're good. I can see you.
I'll
You're
turn
fine.
I'll turn the light on the next episode I record. But yeah, so that's been fun. I think it's slowly disappearing as the show goes on.
Who do you think
But
are going to be the championship? That's what we
yep,
probably
that
should have
was
done.
exactly where I was getting
Oh,
to
okay, okay,
before I
okay,
got
okay.
my tangent about the light.
Okay,
But
okay, okay,
but
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, Big 12 championship picks. I'll let you go ahead and go first. What is your Big 12 championship pick?
This is like really hard, to be honest. I didn't really think of it. I think it could be, I think Texas Tech and Utah is probably going to be mine, but those four, it also depends. It comes down to who plays who, right?
Yeah,
Like, so if one of those teams, so it's going to be, in my opinion, I think it will be Utah, Iowa State, BYU, Texas Tech, Kansas State, ASU, but I'm not looking exactly at who they're playing. So if one of those teams doesn't have to play the other, it could be work out they will have the advantage. But I think Utah is really going to surprise a lot of people. And like you said, and I think Texas Tech just has so much talent on Texas Tech. But with history, Texas Tech's ability to finish is not on my
Not
side
on their
here for
side
the
a little
history.
bit.
Yeah.
Not only
Who do you
that,
think?
but what
Oh,
concerns
go
me
on.
is their tough road games as well. I think those road games
Yeah.
could end up being what cost them a spot, including that game at Utah and at Arizona State, which gets me to Arizona State versus Utah is my going to be my pick. I got Arizona State winning that one and repeating as the champions, but Utah makes a run as well. Kansas State just kind of is right there in that race for me. I like the Wildcats a lot as well. I just had them falling just barely out of it. The other teams kind of end up beating each other out a little bit, but this is
And
tough. This is tough to
it
pick.
also it also could come down to a point differential of who,
Yeah.
like, say Arizona State shows up and they just like don't play well that game and lose by 25 to somebody, and say, the other team loses by 7, and then it's a three-way tie necessarily. So that person, remember the Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas Tech in 2009, right?
Oh
2008, when they
yes,
all three beat
yes.
each other. So they all came down to that. That's what it could also come down to, in my personal opinion. But what we talked about before the podcast is, for all you Big 12 fans out there, the last place team last year, don't feel bad if your team's on the bottom, because that's the team who won the conference, is Arizona State. They were picked to go dead last year and won the conference. So all this stuff doesn't matter at the end of the day. It matters what your team does on the field. So we could be completely wrong.
Absolutely. Any of these teams can win it. One last question to close this out here. How many playoff teams from the Big 12?
It's such a hard question, because I feel like the Big 12 won't get the respect even if they do prove it on the field. Like, people still think the SEC is still the best conference in college football. Anyways, Tennessee got pummeled and Notre Dame beat Georgia in the playoff. We're still talking about the SEC. So I think
And
is
by
they
the
would
way,
have.
we're not just seeing that. Like we're seeing their conference this week. Just we were recording this during SEC media days, and they are talking this week like as if none of the other conferences should even exist. That is how they're speaking this week.
I don't even watch it. Really? Really?
I
I
don't
just saw
watch it
when
either, but I just see the quotes come across, and it's like, oh man, come on, guys.
I need a break from I just want the games to start. I don't even do the recruiting clock. I just get over it. It's just like, will drive you nuts. It's like the news. But I mean, I thought the only thing I thought was funny was Sark walked on for the Texas A&M to the Texas A&M song, and he didn't,
Oh,
like,
that was great.
nobody did anything. But yeah, they have to do well out of conference. They have to win these games. And that's what it comes down to. We are When you're the bottom of you're looking at the team that has the more money, or the conference that has the more money, you have to go there and you have to show them. And if you do it on the field, the facts speak for the facts. People can't I'm sure they'll find a reason, but if it go the SEC and the Big Ten are looking for a reason to say, you know what, you guys are terrible, and if you
Yeah,
lose one of those, that's what's going to happen. Versus if the SEC lost, they'd be like, oh, well, we have 5 other teams,
yeah,
so
or
those are
this excuse, that excuse, that kind of stuff.
exactly. So the biggest one is Colorado, Georgia Tech. In my opinion, that game is huge. And I just hope Colorado makes it, you know, it's not really a blowout. But the thing a lot of people don't realize about Colorado is playing in that high altitude for Georgia Tech is a very place none of those guys have ever played in.
That's a unique
And
challenge. Yeah,
and yeah, when I was in Wyoming, we played Ball State, beat them by like 50. If we were not 50 points better than Ball State. And they just were not used to playing in that. So I think those are kind of things, but it comes down to me for out of conference. If they do well out of conference, I'd say two maybe. But if they do badly, I think one.
yep. And so if you go with one, then you're going for your championship pick to make
Yeah.
the
Do you
playoff there.
think is Yeah, do you think they will have more than one?
I think it's possible they get two. And actually, my scenario sets up a pretty interesting one there because Arizona State beats Utah. And then it could be between Utah and Kansas State. Utah got in my scenario, I have Utah getting in the Big 12 championship by beating Kansas State at home. Let's say Utah has one more loss after the conference championship. That'll be kind of the debate there, where if Utah loses that spot to Kansas State because they have one more loss, or do they not deserve to lose that spot because they won head to head in late November? That'll kind of be
What is
interesting.
Yeah. What is concerning to me is everybody beats everybody up, then they're not going to let anybody in. Like it's going to
Yeah,
be a one person. So if BYU beats ASU, ASU beats Iowa State, Iowa State beats Kansas State, and then Texas Tech loses to Utah, everybody's got one loss or two losses, and then maybe somebody's going to get upset, a few of those, maybe. You're taking everybody out of it. And then plus you have out of conference. How does everybody do out of conference? But look at it last year. SMU made the championship, they made the college football playoff. BYU didn't. BYU beat SMU in their house in the beginning of the season. So how is that? That's the same
yeah,
scenario, but ACC got two in.
exactly. Like, and that's kind of the other thing too, where it sometimes it's not even who you lose to or how you lost; it's when you lose. Like BYU lost late in the year, so that's why they weren't even in the conversation somehow. Um, like everyone wanted to debate SMU versus Alabama, but honestly, to me, like I thought the debate should have been BYU versus SMU, which we saw in the field.
Yeah, I absolutely think it's really, again, it comes down to schedule. Like Indiana did not play anybody out of conference. Colorado played one team, Nebraska. It didn't go too well. Nebraska was 6 wins. USC played LSU. USC didn't do too hot in the Big Ten, and they beat LSU. That should take stuff. That should take credibility away from a top team in the. They were a
Yeah,
top five team
that
probably.
that one got noticeably ignored as the season went on too.
But it's like if Florida State goes in against Alabama and gets their teeth kicked in, which could happen, uh, or if Clemson beats LSU or LSU beats Clemson, those things should be accountable in the playoff committee, and we should go over of who won and who didn't win, not based off of, oh, well, SEC has this. But teams, what's going to happen now are teams are going to stop playing hard out of conference schedules. Nobody's going to play each other, and the SEC is just going to play, the southeastern non group Power
Yeah,
Fives, and then the Big 12 is just going to play the Mountain West.
right.
I mean,
And we're really entering that kind of problematic scenario here where we're starting to see the potential for teams to just not schedule tough out of conference games. Or, we go on the flip side where, these conferences keep pushing for all these locked auto bids. And then we play tough non conference games, but they don't mean anything because all the bids are locked in, anyways. So,
everybody's going to start. Even Florida's AD said we're not going to play anybody out of conference that's tough. These are, I mean, multiple good. I said this 3 years ago that everybody, it's not worth the gamble. Penn State hasn't played Temple since 2016. Do you think? I always tweet about that. Do you think there's not a reason for that? Yeah, they don't want to see Hassan Reddick. They don't
yeah,
want to see those guys that really we were really good, but all of a sudden now we're on the bottom. And Temple and Penn State are supposed to play next year. So Penn State, it's not worth the risk. It's almost like there's no winning formula for the big schools, in my opinion. When you play they want to play the easiest schedule because they put a lot of money into these teams. They put a lot of money in. Penn State doesn't want to lose to Bowling Green, which they almost did last year, and that would be detrimental. Notre Dame does not want to lose to NIU. It makes them look like a joke. And that's kind of, so what we're just all going to play the easiest schedules so that
right.
but that's not saying who the best conference is. That's making it easier for people in the SEC and the people at the top, or the people in the Big Ten or the ACC, to say, "Oh, we're the best conference. We didn't look at our out of conference schedule. What we went 8-1, and they played the freaking community college next door. You
Yeah,
know,
right.
so
They play those games, and then the SEC goes, well, hey, look, the Mouse made a rating that shows all of our teams are top 16, so we should just have that, right?
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's and who want and this is the last thing that I would say to you is that who wants to see a what is the best season of college football? And I would say it's 2007, right? Where
Oh yeah,
everybody didn't know, and we got to see Boise State go and play these other teams and didn't, and you had no idea who was going to win. You had no idea they were if there was going to be an upset or not an upset. Why do people want to watch? Even the people at Alabama want to watch that, not the people necessarily just me that wants to watch that. So I think a lot of different types of fans don't just want to see five teams and that's it. And that's where I feel like we're going and we don't that where college football is going, it's turning into where games don't matter. Well, if you want to go watch the NFL, go watch the NFL. This isn't the NFL.
yeah, 100%, yeah. And it's honestly why we, I guess this is kind of how we go under a sign off here. It's why this show exists. I forgot to introduce our show at the beginning of this. Maybe I'll cut this clip and put it at the beginning. But why we exist as a show, because we notice the larger networks are only talking about 10 or so teams and trying to act like no one else exists. And, we felt like there was a need for coverage for everyone else in the sport. In this case, there's 120 or so teams that could stand to, hear about their team and are excited to hear about their team. And that's been what we do here.
And
Um,
and
yeah,
today it's all about betting too. It's just like everybody just talks about
yeah,
betting and it's just like nothing to do with the game. It's like what's the under, what's the over. And now we're just gonna have Portnoy on the noon kickoff. I'm sure he has a lot of analysis to get in deep into the game. But it just seems like it's almost a social media, like the sports to me seems like it's really turning into the WWE where it's just like it's almost like a paparazzi rather than we're actually talking about the game. So it's awesome what you guys do, and I really want to thank you for having me on. And hopefully, in the near future, I could come on again and talk about whatever conference you guys want
yeah.
me to.
Yeah, we'll have you on during the season and stuff. Kind of, we'll break down a few weeks and stuff like that. And so, for those who do not follow you, can they find you?
I do a lot of Instagram stuff, so I'm more on Instagram. I'd say is the most thing I do is Coach Rohaly, my last name. Or you can also find me on Twitter, which I've been doing more of recently. Uh, is the real football liaison? That's my name on there because I used to use my name, but then everybody would. I didn't like it being on the internet all the time, so I changed the Twitter to not my real name and just use it as a, a company more kind of. But yeah, it's been great. I love doing and I do a lot of more of old stuff and give my point of views and try to give a different view like you guys do and try to give love to all different institutions and players that don't get the love that they deserve. I think college football is much more than just Power Five national championship. What I grew up loving it is all those the greatness of you never know who's going to win on certain days, and that's what makes college football great. And we're not seeing that as much today, which is really sad, in my personal opinion. And hopefully, we can get back to that.
100%, yeah. And I think that's what us and our that's why we got connected, and what us and our community will continue to push for.
Yeah, especially when my Temple Owls go beat Georgia Tech in Oklahoma this fall. Hopefully, we can.
Oh, them beating Oklahoma at home would be just so amazing. Oh, that would be so great. That is an awesome Temple hoodie, by the way. Um, but we'll sign
Adam
off here.
DeMichael actually got it for me. Adam DeMichael, he's the
Ooh,
quarterback coach at Oklahoma, and he's a Temple legend. So he was on our staff, or he's at Nebraska. Sorry, Nebraska for Coach Rule. So So all the Temple people in Nebraska, we got a lot of them out there. So I want to wish them good luck this upcoming season, and hopefully they can make some noise. And thank you for having me, guys. And it was awesome, and I love what you guys do. And any time you ever need me to come on, or if you want to do something, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have you on anytime. This has been an episode of Updog Sports Talk. Be sure to follow us on all the platforms. We are on basically everything: Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of fun stuff, as well as our podcasts are on YouTube and Spotify and everywhere else that you get your podcasts. Have a great week, everyone. See ya.